But going for the walk this morning, and I look out over the horizon, and there's this pall of smoke in the air and hanging over the sun, and that's sadness. But
Well, I hope everybody stays safe and that you're okay. It's beautiful.
yeah,
It's beautiful out there, and I know it's kind of like a common occurrence, but doesn't make it easier anytime it comes along.
no, it's still sucky. Luckily, everybody's kind of banding together to gather supplies for, the people who've had to evacuate or whose
Nice.
homes have been burned and stuff. And so it's great to see the community pulling together, but it's just a bummer in general.
Sure.
But yeah, not to start us out all bummy this morning. How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. It went by way too quickly. I worked in the house a little bit, worked in the house a lot bit. Got some rest and relaxation in, shot a gig for a prestigious academy right behind my studio. We did some senior portraits at their spring fling. So I set up a whole photo booth there, which was a ton of fun. I didn't think I'd have that much fun, but I don't miss being in high school. And other than that, it was just a really cool weekend. The weather was great, really warm. So yeah, I can't complain at all.
That's awesome. I love that. Bassam, good morning. It's nice having you back.
Good morning. Good morning. Nice to be back. Yeah,
How
I've
are
been
ya?
kind of disconnected for a week. I was so busy last week. I feel like I was completely out of it. But yeah, all good. Good. Had a great weekend. Weather's coming. We have a nice. Well, I don't want to call it a heat wave because you guys will laugh at us. But it's been pretty. It's been pretty warm, pretty early here, and it's fun. Got the pool going, and can't wait to start using it. Yes.
Right on. Heck
Yes.
yeah. So what is warm?
Like 90 in May as opposed to like 60 in May.
Did you say 90?
Like, yeah, close. Like 32 Celsius. Yeah, it's about 89 or 90.
Wow.
Yeah, for the last, well, not today, but for a couple of days, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. It's the
Wow.
warmest. It's the earliest. Definition of a heat wave is I think 3 days in a row. It's the earliest since we've had it since 1895 apparently. So
Well, that's not disturbing at
a
all.
bit of history. Yeah, it's nice.
Man. Well,
Yeah.
I see we've got a lot of friends joining us this morning. I see Andrea, Sisela, and Bobby, Erica, Jonas, Carla, and Gail, Carol, Dee, Rohit, and George. So glad to have you all with us this morning as we start our week off. And I will go ahead and say, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Morning Walk with the Artist Forge, where we learn to think like artists. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host, and I will be joined by your co-hosts, Matt Stagliano and Bassam Seba, and hopefully a couple more of our regulars will join us this morning. We'll have to wait and see. They may have had long weekends. There's no way to know. But we're all together today and excited to be here on a Mindset Monday where I have an experience I want to share and then a question I want to ask and see if we can maybe kind of puzzle through some of this together. And I'm sure everybody will have some of their own experiences to tie off into mine. And maybe we'll come away with some kind of, I don't want to say answer, but some kind of solid ideas. Let me just stop that and go ahead and share. So, in general, the topic is tied around what our definition of success is and expectation management. So those two things kind of form, I guess, the nucleus of what I want to talk about. And I'm going to tie in the idea also of luck or providence or just the unexpected nature of life. So kind of keep those things in your head as I share my experience. And then we'll see if we can break it down a little bit. So, as many of you know, I have been forging my way into the realm of TikTok because so many authors seem to be having success there. And so I began by just doing some research. So I would just watch videos and see interplay and try to figure out what the community was like and what was popular and all of these kind of things. Once I had been there for a while, I started making a few videos just to see what would them and how people would respond, what it would be like just to be part of that community. And then I learned that it takes 1,000 followers before you can share a link in your bio that people can follow to go back and find out what you do or buy your merchandise or whatever it is. So I was on a mission to get to that 1,000 followers, and I was sharing multiple videos a day, always trying to keep within the theme of fantasy, of books and authoring and all of that kind of stuff, and art, like right within that sphere where I kind of live. Even though the sphere is relatively large, it's not very niche, but still trying to keep everything within that bubble. Not too long ago, I had about 1,200 or so followers, and I wanted to do some crafting on Mother's Day because I hadn't had enough time lately, and so I pulled out some string lights and some hot glue, and I made little glowing mushrooms. And I thought I'll just record a little bit of everything I do and then just tell people how I did it in case it seems like it's something they would want to do. Very unexpectedly, that video blew up. Right now it has 1.3 million views. It gained me something like 13,000 plus followers since Mother's Day. And it's left me, number one, obviously really surprised. Number two, just a little moderately frustrated because of course it's not going to be a video about my books or anything else that goes viral, right? It's going to be a video about mushroom crafts, which was unexpected. And then wondering how or if this new audience that has kind of surprisingly come my way is actually going to do me any good in the effort to make a living out of publishing while I'm using my art to market what I do. So one, unexpected, right? Two, not necessarily completely tied to the main idea or the main thrust of why I would want people to follow me in the first place. Three, I don't know how that's going to affect my marketing efforts long term. More views and more audience don't always equate to more sales or more engagement, right? That's not always the same thing. So after having this unexpected thing happen, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that that content was in a big way kind of a piece of throwaway content. I'm really glad I had the infrastructure in place with my website and my mailing list and other things that I could benefit from that. So definitely people are going to my website, which is great. I've sold a few books, but not many. But the point is, when I'm looking at my definition of success in this effort of publishing, I want to be able to earn a solid, full living off of book publishing, which number one isn't easy. But number two would make a big difference to my family and allow me to do this for the rest of my life, which is the goal. So that's what success looks like. How did I come to that in the first place? But how do these unexpected changes start to affect how we think of our career? Because I don't want to say I didn't have any control over it, because obviously I posted the content, but I don't have any control over what catches, right? Like what goes viral or what gets people excited, or we can only make educated guesses about that. So when these unexpected things come along and they kind of collide with where we thought we wanted to go and what our idea of success was, and then we're forced to really consider and kind of pivot if pivoting needs to happen, or see how we can take this unexpected thing and turn that toward where we wanted to go. Or maybe does the unexpected thing even perhaps hit us like a comet and change our entire trajectory in some way? And do we have to be flexible in our ideas of success in order to account for the unexpected things that happen? Or is there something about luck or divine providence or whatever you want to call it, that influences like, I guess what I want to ask is, can we be over tied to our definition of success in a way that doesn't allow for the natural pivots that come because of circumstance? Because when they do, it can weirdly feel, for as much as it's wonderful to have a lot of new people to engage with, it's also, there's a weird also sense of disappointment. Like, well, what does that mean? You know, and I'm sure within a couple more days, I will go back to being relatively invisible. But the point is, when things like that happen, they can completely alter your trajectory. So, how do you deal with these changes that affect where you thought you were going? Because we have a compass, and maybe something happens that alters our ability to go in that direction, or our desire to go in that direction, or even opens up a new door that we weren't expecting. And mentally, not being able to go through the original door that you planned for, that you were hoping for, that you were spearheading towards, can weirdly feel like failure, I guess, or can be disappointing. And I'm not trying to say that I am disappointed or that I'm ungrateful or any of that stuff, but I'm just using this experience that has had me thinking a whole lot about what I'm doing and where I'm going, as an example, hopefully, for those unexpected things that can happen in our life that come along and just either knock us off course or propel us in a couple degrees to one side or the other or whatever. I think I'm rambling at this point because I feel like I'm having a little bit of a difficult time really getting at the heart of what I want to say. So I'm going to shut up and just see if anything I have said so far resonates or maybe brings anything to mind, Matt and Bassam, for you two, as far as this idea of how we define success and how we manage our expectations around reaching that success and those unexpected things that can come along and kind of change our trajectory or whatever. If anything has, sprung to life, I'd really like to shut up and hear what you think.
Go ahead, Bassam. Bassam, please.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, Nicole. What you're trying to get at is not necessarily the actual experience that you had. But, the first thing that came to mind is the word one hit wonder, right? It's when we have to be careful not to jump on these unexpected things that come our way blindly. I mean, we've often talked about looking out for opportunities, trying to take advantage of them, doing everything possible to be out there so that you can feel out, especially feel out, whatever you're trying to do, but especially in a new platform that you're trying to get on. And the first thing I would do is just take a step back and say, what just happened, and try to go through some process of validation of what is it, and what is it not, and try to dig deeper and try to maybe look into what is driving it. And to me, it's an opportunity to experiment further. It's an opportunity to explore something. But I would be careful in jumping to the conclusion every time we have something positive happen and unexpectedly or surprisingly, and then say that's where we want to be. I've succeeded. I'm this. I'm that. So again, push the pause button and say, what is it and what is it not? What can I do to find out more about what happened? What can I do next? How do I test it out? How do I validate the nuances behind it? At the same time, you got to be careful not to miss the opportunity completely, especially in this world of instant satisfaction and people want more and more and more as fast as possible. That's kind of the first thought that came to my mind.
So when you're saying what is it and what is it not, you're referring more to as it relates to your direction, right? So if somebody were to have something happen in their life and then they would say, okay, does this actually knock me off course or alter my course, or is just one of those things that are going to happen along the way that I can kind of see and go, well, that was cool, and then keep on chugging? Or is this the kind of thing that does actually influence my course? Is that what you're getting at?
I think it's both. I mean, I don't know much about TikTok because I'm barely on TikTok, but looking down at metrics and see some of the data behind what happened. I don't know what kind of metrics you have on TikTok, but validating, your first thought could be, well, none of these people, of 13,000 people that followed me because of this kind of free video, will actually be interested in my stuff. But is that so? What metrics do you have there that can help you dig deeper? I'm getting pretty practical here, but you can also question, is there an opportunity here for something else for this specific audience? But one thing that came to mind right away is I had something, I'm not going to say equivalent, but something came to mind. I posted my first boudoir video on YouTube. I opened up a channel. I had 0 followers, 0 posting. I had nothing. I posted my first video on YouTube, and within a week it had over 75,000 views, and now it's up to 125,000. And the first thing I looked at in the metrics is, what kind of audience do I have? And 99.9% of the audience was men over such and such age, right? So that's one example of validating, trying to find out who is the audience, what is the potential, is there an opportunity? Now, there may be an opportunity to show boudoir videos to that group or that demographic, but that's an example of what I mean.
Right. Okay. I'm getting you. So then I'm trying to take our experiences and simplify and broaden them so that other people can hopefully relate them to things that may happen in their careers. But the idea being, if this audience does not fit with the overall demographic that I want to work with, then I may be in a position to just ignore the fact that happened and keep pushing toward the right people. Or I can maybe ask myself, okay, since this demographic is now in my sphere, are there things I can give them that do actually benefit my business and help me continue to move toward the place I want to go?
Exactly. So in the case I gave, so is this demographic the type of people that will have a boudoir photo shoot with me? And the answer is probably not. But maybe there's an opportunity of actually targeting those men and marketing to them for that very small percentage, which would be a lot for me, but very small percentage, that are looking for a boudoir experience for their partner or wife or girlfriend or whatever. And in your case, just because you have, let's say, I don't know what the audience is, but the 13,000 new followers, that could be teenage boys and girls, I don't know, doesn't mean that there isn't a percentage of them that would love the literature that you write, the books that you write, right? So how do you go about figuring that out, if you can? How do you test that out?
For sure. Okay, so, and I want to tie that in as well to what Carol just said in the comments, which is, if you were to feed that direction for the audience that was drawn to you, or drawn to what you did, you'd have to keep doing more of that. And so that's kind of ties in with what Bassam is saying, I think, in terms of, well, how do I find out if these folks are the right folks? And that question becomes, well, you try different types of content and see if they respond, right? And luckily, I think the fantasy community, of fantasy lovers in general, we tend to really love anything related to fantasy. And most fantasy fans tend to be fantasy readers, even if it's light reading, which is great. That doesn't necessarily mean they would read my books, but however, I think it does give me room to test. But if we take my experience and broaden it a little bit, I think looking at Bassam's advice and Carol's observation might be a really great way to say, okay, I had this experience, it came along, and it might have, like, imagine you're a top spinning on a table, right? And something hits the top and it starts to wobble. The top might travel in a different direction. It might just wobble and continue to stand still. And I think then asking ourselves, okay, so this collision that just happened that could potentially affect my ability to keep doing what I'm doing, or maybe give me the opportunity to swivel in a new direction. Is that something I actually want? Like, I don't want to keep using myself as an example, but I kind of have to. I have obviously been an artist and a crafter since forever. It's a big part of what brings me enjoyment in life. All of it definitely related to fantasy things. It's super cool to be able to share that with people. I very much enjoy it. Do I want to make a career out of that? Not necessarily, because it's one of those things that's just mine and it doesn't have any pressure attached to it. So I can do it just for fun. So is that growing audience who showed up because of a cool craft going to now convince me to just start making crafts for money? Well, no. So that's something I can say for myself right away. That's not what's going to happen. So if I happen to gain all of these people on pure chance, and then look at what my definition of success for myself is and what I don't want it to be, then that's not a pivot I'm willing to make. But can I test this audience and see how many of them will respond favorably towards my actual definition of success? And maybe that's only 20 or 100 or 50 or whatever. But even if so, that's still more than there was before. So that I can't really complain about. But somebody else in my shoes might say, I never thought making a living off crafts was a possibility for me, but this could be proof that there is an audience for that kind of thing. Several people have asked me if I sell them. I have shunted them off towards other people who do. But I mean, that is potentially a pivotal moment, right? Like, once you have a proof of concept or a proof of interest or an audience all of a sudden who's interested in that thing, how tied to you are you, or how tied to your definition of success are you? And is any success in a creative field better than small or moderate success in your original one? And could we be missing opportunities for new and expanded things if we were to immediately shut things down? I realize I'm asking you a shit ton of questions. I'm just trying to pull the focus away from me, I guess, and give enough examples that everybody could insert themselves.
Nicole, I just want to give an example. I spent 12 hours driving last week, as I usually do once a month, and I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. And I've been on this how I built this podcast, where they interview entrepreneurs, very famous ones, billionaires that have made it. People like started Instagram and Squarespace and WordPress and so on. And inevitably, most of these people, if you actually listen to enough of them, had a moment like that where their original intent of the product was something, but by listening to either customers or seeing trends that they didn't think about, or just pure luck having had a success with something, pivoted, still went directionally in the same direction, but it wasn't at all what they had in mind when they first started their business. Example after example after example. I just thought I'd point that out.
No, that's great. And I think that's definitely kind of at the heart of the question. So I might still be going north, but maybe I'm going like northwest, right? Or something like
exactly. Or you've picked up 5 other stops on the way as opposed to just going straight.
Right.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm quiet because I wanted to give Matt a chance to respond. I should have said so.
You got to cue me in, or else I'm just going to sit here with a blank look on my face all day long. So this is an interesting topic for me, just because I think when you started talking about unexpected changes versus success, it was my entire timeline of career, right? So I'll take the focus off of you and put the focus on me for a second, and just think about where my life has kind of gone up and down and round and round. And at every point, I'm redefining who I am, what I want, what success is, right? So I went from being a biotech to nightclub management to high tech to mergers and acquisitions to being a consultant, right? All that corporate stuff. Then when I lost my corporate job, became a consultant. When I left consultancy because it was just draining on me completely, I started shooting pictures. And the reason I started shooting pictures is because I had a severance and I had a year off, right? And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was a perfect time for a life change. So I was starting my, training with firearms around 2013 thereabouts. I'd take my camera to the range. I'd shoot pictures of people having fun and doing the training and teaching and learning. And what I found was there was a niche for this. I didn't set out to be a photographer. It just started to happen. As people gained interest and there was an audience there, it wasn't so much, do I need to shoot firearms photography, which is what it wound up being. But it was like, do I need to become a photographer? Right? It was just a hobby at that point. And I realized I didn't have a job. I needed to make some level of money beyond the severance. So how do I start doing this? And now suddenly I'm a photographer and getting commercial jobs and NRA campaigns and all this sort of stuff. Then as I started to move forward in the timeline, 2014, 2015, I'm still doing the photography, but starting to shift it a little bit more to editorial stuff and writing for magazines. So not only did they want the pictures, but they wanted articles to go along with that. Okay, so now I'm writing, and I guess I'm going to do some of that. And then it was television host, and now I guess I'm going to do some of that. And at every point, I wasn't thinking, is this audience going to respond to what I'm doing? I was just trying to find my own direction, and every little experience, every unexpected change. Oh, I guess I'm doing a TV show now. I'll be over here. You have to reset your level of success personally versus what you think other people want. An audience is great, but if it doesn't speak to the intention of what you're trying to do, then it doesn't really matter. So I relate that to my story because by 2017-ish, I was so burned out on doing the same stuff over and over. I knew I needed a change. So I started looking back at my photography and saying, all right, well, what is it that really drives me about this? And it was the portraiture. So that's when I found Sue Bryce and I opened my studio and I did all these things to get me into the portraiture genre. Okay, so now I've got a studio and I've got two businesses that I'm running. Now let me get into that. And there was an opportunity to make some bracelets as a memorial for someone in that industry, and we made those. And suddenly I'm a jewelry maker, and now we're making jewelry and kitschy stuff for people. That's a business that has kind of erupted. So every time I go along, now that I have all this experience, I started talking to you, and now we're doing the Artist Forge and educating and speaking. And at every level and at every expansion of who I am and what I'm doing, I look at redefining success for me and saying, okay, am I happy? Am I making the money that I want to make? Does it bring me satisfaction and joy? And if it does those things, then it might be a direction in which I can move. But if I'm doing it solely for the likes or for the affirmation, and feeling like I need to serve that audience in order to be successful, I don't look at work and success that way. I look at work and success as, am I putting out something that brings out the best in me? I don't care what that is, whether it's consulting or commercial photography or, portrait photography, podcasting, whatever it is. If it brings me a certain joy, I know I'm bringing a different energy to it and that I'm giving the audience something different. I don't look to set out to create an audience. I just do what I think my purpose is to do on this planet for my short period of time that I'm here. So why not live my life? And if people want to come along with that journey, fantastic. If they give me money for what I do, even better. But I've got to be able to define my level of success for me. When it comes to a business, there are certain fundamental milestones that you have to hit for success. Am I making enough money to support myself? That's a pretty standard measure. But if you're doing that in the service of someone else's expectations instead of your own, then I don't think you're really working for the right reasons. So when it comes to, your writing versus mushroom crafts or, fantasy photography, whatever it is, I think as you explore all these different sides of yourself, you find that success takes on a different definition than just audience numbers or metrics or demographics. It becomes, whose lives are you affecting and how are you doing that? And I think the only way that you can do that is pull that authenticity out from all of your experience, from all the years that you've been doing stuff, and that people listen to you and resonate with you in a certain way. And that's your audience. It has nothing to do with the TikTok numbers, right? I doubt 17,000 people are looking at Bassam's video because all those 17,000 guys want to get into boudoir photography. The algorithm's serving them a different thing. But that doesn't mean that Bassam, you don't go after a boudoir audience, right? You don't still keep producing what you produce because the audience will come. So when we talk about unexpected changes versus success, and we're thinking about, all these twists and turns that life takes, I always come back to, for me, what is it that I'm feeling at the moment? What makes me feel successful? What makes me feel full in my heart and soul? And I think only I can define that. I can't look to my audience to define that. Now, if there's a certain thing that they want and I see an opportunity that aligns with who I am, what I want to do, if it serves, then that Venn diagram, you start to get into the middle of it, where all those things meet, and it's good. So that's the way that I approach it. I think having a varied past, always taking these twists and turns, only adds to the character, only adds to your capability to deliver more and to widen an audience, rather than going from niche to niche to niche or discipline to discipline. Just keep doing what keeps you interested and speaks to your overall intention as to why you're on this planet. I think if you can hone in on those feelings, then it starts to become less about chasing success and more about doing what you love and then having people come along for that ride. That was a really long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I sit with all of this.
No, it's fantastic. And I think, like, listening to you and Bassam and then hearing you relate your experience with the different career paths and the kind of twists and turns that you've taken to get to this point, is just a reminder, which is why I brought up the idea of expectation management at the beginning and how that relates to how we define success. Because I think as artists, and this is something that gets said over and over again in the photography realm as well, but this idea that we define our own success, right? And you cannot be chasing somebody else's idea of what success is. But recognizing that these unexpected things are going to come into our path also makes us, I think, have to ask the question, which is why I brought this up in the first place, of how tied am I to this idea of success? Can I have, or is a loose direction better than having a single-minded, ferocious focus on one thing, and everything else that comes along is either just going to bounce right off me and it's not going to affect me? But what happens when it seems like the entire universe is yelling at you, you're not supposed to be going that way, and you keep pushing forward and you don't end up in the idea that you've built for yourself of what success is meant to be? Rather than taking, I guess, these twists and turns as they come and saying, well, is this something I can pivot with? Or maybe is this a new good direction? Does it make me happy? A lot of the things that you've mentioned. Maybe defining success too strictly can really hold us back in that case. Because at least in this instance right now, something that should be just kind of a cool thing to happen, like, hey, a whole bunch of people resonated with that. Cool. Like, that's exciting. There's this huge part of me that's like, why couldn't it have been the thing that I'm trying to do? Why couldn't it have been, and it stopped me from really just enjoying what happened in a way that doesn't feel like it has to be tied to my vision of what success is. I don't know if I'm making any sense
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you do. And I think, one of the things that I would challenge you with is say, okay, well, what was it about, making mushroom lamps that sparked this joy and how you put it out there and how you promoted it. And it was just pure joy. It just came from you. I watched the videos, I saw it, I thought it was awesome. And, you're putting something out there that was the true, real you, right? And when you do that with the writing, do you promote your writing in a different way? Do you go about it from a more business-like, directed, very regimented sort of approach to getting it out there? And I've watched, a lot of your TikTok videos. You take a very similar approach, but I wonder if mentally or, energetically that you are approaching them differently. If you are, which is perfectly fine, understand what the difference is between finding pure joy from crafting and then just sharing that with people versus writing and making it a job and feeling like you need to succeed there, like there's a bar that you have to hit with writing, versus not having any expectations around mushroom lamps and that being a success. Okay, that doesn't mean that you have to uproot your life and become a mushroom lamper. I'm making up terms, for the rest of your life. I think what you can do is say, well, what place am I in mentally and energetically that I can bring back to the writing promotion and take it the same way? And if you are doing it that way, I think you'll eventually line up with the success you're looking for. The interesting thing is we get the vision in our mind so much about what success has to look like. I have to have this much money in the bank. I have to be awarded this many awards. I have to be on stage. I have to do this. I have to do that. We make it so clear that we forget about being grateful for the path that's getting us there and realizing that there is a lot of what we determine as success already in our lives. We're just looking at it through a lens that isn't this perfect representation of what we thought it was going to be. Whereas if you step back and have a little bit more gratitude towards it, you realize that, oh, I actually did do this. I actually did reach my goal. It didn't look like I wanted it to, but I reached it. I got there. And I think we don't take the step back enough. And I think Sam was saying this as well. We don't take the step back enough to realize, oh, if I just look at this from a slightly different angle, not completely differently, but slightly different angle, you realize that that success and that goal is still there. It just wasn't what you thought it was going to look like exactly. And I've heard that from business owner after business owner and photographer after photographer, from corporate world to now, that where you wind up, myself included, is far different from where we originally thought we were going to be. And that's okay, because we're still in alignment with what it is that we want to provide. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that. And you touched on a couple of things that resonated in the first, asking about that energy. And I think you're right in the fact that when there is consequences tied to the thing, there's a different kind of energy that comes along with that. So rather than just sharing something for the joy of sharing it, you're sharing something with the desire of some kind of response, right? And of action on somebody's part. And if they don't, then your goal for that thing was a failure. Rather than allowing it to be what it is and for people to respond in whatever way feels natural to them based on what you're doing. And so I definitely think that translates into this idea that I have kind of percolating in my head of like fluid goals or fixed goals. And maybe the idea of a fixed goal has its own downsides in that the only measure of success is if you finish the picture perfectly, right? But we all know that perfect doesn't exist. And so maybe when we are trying to come up with these ideas of, well, how am I going to define success? And we're often told, we look at things like SMART goals, right? And we want something that is discrete, it's measurable, it's very clear. We know exactly how to move in that direction. And I think the problem we forget is we're not accounting for life or luck or providence or whatever you want to call it, and how that might change what that discrete goal is. So maybe, and that is absolutely how I have moved toward things in my life with this, and it's even how I create. And I know I've mentioned this before, but often I'll have a very clear picture in my head of what I want to make, and then that is the thing that I go to make. And oftentimes there are times when I nail it and it's like the best feeling ever, but more often than not, I just end up somewhere in the ballpark and things have changed a little bit or maneuvered a little bit. And I have not, for some reason, translated that into the pursuit of whatever my idea of success is. That seems so much more fixed in my head instead of fluid, which I think, given the, uncontrollable nature of life and the unexpectedness of circumstance, it definitely seems like a fluid goal is much better. So what if the goal was not, I want to make a living off of publishing? What if the goal was, I want to make a living off of the arts, and I'm going to do that through publishing as long as it continues to be viable, right? And if it shifts and something happens, maybe that's not viable anymore, but I can still make a living off of photography or mushroom lamps or whatever. I'm still hitting my goal, but maybe the end result looks a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I don't know, that's kind of where it's making my mind wander to.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, is that if you are in a place where you can set a goal that is wide, like narrow enough that, it's not just some, I want to be happy, right? You have a slightly more narrow goal than that, but you do leave yourself some leeway for opportunity. I think that's a nice, happy middle ground. So yeah, I think that's the right track there. In the chat here, Sharon comes up with a fantastic point, and she says the success comes from finding that authentic audience, and sometimes it takes time to actually find them. And these days, with instant gratification, it's becoming incredibly hard to take that time to curate that audience while remaining true to yourself. And I think that instant gratification part is really, really interesting, because it's on both sides. The audience wants instant gratification. Give me what I want, what I came to the internet for. Give me that thing. And you're looking for, not you specifically, but we are looking for a way to achieve the instant gratification of success, and we've got to get there like this. So our attention span and our patience has gone way down, and so we feel like we need to move faster. I think that it creates a lot of pressure. So what Sharon's saying, if I interpret it correctly, is, yeah, there's everybody clamoring for this instant gratification and an audience looking for a tribe. And if you just stay true to what it is that you love to do, that audience will arrive. And I'm a big believer in that. I think if you just stay on your true north, and if you stay on your compass of whatever your success looks like, that your audience will show up. Is it going to be a Gary Vee sized audience? Is it going to be Matt in Maine type audience? Totally different sizes. But you have to understand, do you need something really large, or do you need just a group of dedicated fans, and that help you feel satisfied with your art? It's different for everybody, but I think that instant gratification piece is really, really interesting. And she adds in, when planning out goals, you almost need to add that caveat that this may change, which I should really have tattooed on my back, because there's no doubt that this will change. There is no this may change, this will change. So yeah, just some great points by Sharon. Thanks for adding those in.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to give you a second to respond, Bassam. Just encouraging friends in the audience as we get close to the end of the hour. If you have any thoughts,
Sure.
Please do, like Sharon and Carol, and put them in the comments.
Sure. We're talking about goals and objectives, and sometimes we tend to confuse vision and mission, especially mission, with objectives and goals, right? When we're solely focused on goals and objectives, is my definition of narrow, right? Regardless of what the goal and how precise the goal is, how wide it is, versus being constantly focused on the mission and the vision we want for ourselves, but specifically a mission. I'll give an example, again, recent from those podcasts that I've been listening to. The founder of Expedia and Zillow, travel and real estate, his mission was to put the power of information with the consumer and not the seller, right? So when he started out, the idea was this vision of the world where data is shared as opposed to being secretive, and the consumer, the buyer, has enough information to make a proper, educated decision. And how he went through it, he had no idea up front. Started with an idea with Expedia, turned into Expedia, and then moved on and did something similar in the real estate market. So again, it really is exactly what Matt just said. Objectives and goals could change, right? A vision, having a company that's $500,000 doing portrait photography is not a vision. It's just an objective, right? It's not a mission. It's not the why you do things. So I just want to, kind of follow up on this objective slash goals discussion.
Ooh, I love that so much. I think that's definitely something to focus on. And while we're there, I actually want to read two quotes really quickly. The quote is by Oscar Wilde, and then there's a paraphrase by Stephen Fry that I think also deserves to be brought to the forefront of this conversation. So the quote by Oscar Wilde, who is an English playwright, is, "If you want to be a grocer or a general or a politician or a judge, you will invariably become it. That is your punishment. If you never know what you want to be, if you live a life, what some might call the dynamic life, but what I will call the artistic life, if each day you are unsure of who you are and what you know you will never, if each day you are unsure of who you are and what you will never become anything, and that is your reward." And so Stephen Fry then kind of paraphrases this and says, Oscar Wilde said, "If you know what you want to be, then you invariably become it. That is your punishment. But if you never know, then you can be anything." There is a truth to that. We are not nouns. We are verbs. I am not a thing, an actor, a writer. I am a person who does things. I write, I act, and I never know what I'm going to do next. I think you can be imprisoned if you think of yourself as a noun. And I think combined with this idea that you guys have just shared about the difference between vision and then discrete goals, and the idea, however Oscar Wilde and Stephen Fry want to put it, the idea of being a noun versus being a verb, and how we settle on ideas of success, how we come to those ideas, and what kind of fluidity they have, or what kind of variability, or the expectations that we set around those things, how we manage those. I'm starting to feel like allowing those things to be more fluid and not having such a strict adhesion to any one of them might really be a way to take a lot of the pressure off, like you mentioned, Matt, in sharing something like a mushroom lamp. There's no pressure there to have it be any certain way, just a desire to do it and to share it. And if I let that, and hopefully if we let that, or those people who are like me, if we let that be enough, let the vision be the thing, and it's not as if we still don't make discrete goals, right? But the vision is broad enough maybe to account for them. Sorry, I had to jump a style. Anyway, let me know if does it seem like I'm on the kind of the right path with where you guys are suggesting?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it sounds to me, right? And I'm not going to put you on the psychologist couch here, but it sounds like there's a certain amount of rigidity in your thinking about what it is that you measure yourself as a writer, as a crafter, as an artist in general. You have certain very well-defined bars that you need to hit. And in contrast, I'm like, as long as there's a bar somewhere, I'll eventually find it. That doesn't mean that I don't have this motivation in me to do more, but I like being fluid. I like being able to not define myself as a noun. I'm not a photographer. I am much more than that. And by narrowing my focus to only being a photographer, well, I can't also be a carpenter. I can't also be an electrician or a videographer or a paper mache artist, right? Because I keep defining myself as only a photographer. And I think that narrows your view. Unidimensionality is something that really bothers me with people. And I think when we start listening to ourselves, are we being unidimensional instead of really looking at the breadth of experience that we have, the talents that we have, and bring that out? Then we're limiting not only what it is that we can bring to the world, but we're also limiting what our vision of success is. If you're so laser focused on something, I would say, ask yourself, do you want that thing or do you want the feeling that goes along with that thing? Do you want to be a successful writer or do you need financial security? Do you need affirmation? What is it that is really at the bottom of that goal? Because that, kind of like Bassam was saying, that's the mission. That's the thing that keeps you going towards it. Whatever the goal itself is can absolutely change. But it's that mission, that's that thing that drives us, that compass that a lot of people don't find. And they focus instead on, if I had this or if I reach this point, that will determine success. When instead the real definition staring them in the face and they're refusing to look at it.
Yes. Okay. When you mentioned the idea of unidimensionality, and you are absolutely right. I have, so let me see if there's a way I can actually share this so that it does make sense. I have struggled for a long time with being, some people will call it multi-passionate, some people will call it being a multi-potentialite. I've heard many different words used to describe it. But the idea is that there are many things I'm passionately interested in and I enjoy doing. And as somebody who has no real desire to work for somebody else, I am always left trying to figure out how and what to do, because leaving any one of the things behind feels like cutting a piece of myself out. But also, trying to focus on too many things at once is a great way to ensure, at least in my experience so far, that you will never be fully successful at any of them, because you never do one thing long enough to master it or to grow your reach to a point where you can sustain a career based off of it. So having that have been my experience, but then also, I don't want to say I'm flighty, but I probably am. I've had to, in a way, like build rigid structures around myself to work within so that I can hit those goals and be productive and get things done and make things. If I don't have those structures in place that I can move forward with, I will end up on 50 different spots of the map, right? And so I guess having built those for myself, but then trying to go back and recognize, no, maybe there is a way to be this thing that you are and still have it be successful. I don't know how to do that. And so that idea is scary. And maybe it feels better to be successful at some small thing and be able to have done it and reach that goal and prove to myself that I can do it, than to keep what feels like throwing darts in 50 different directions and hoping one of them hits the bullseye, which is sometimes feels like what I'm doing. Since I feel like I'm probably 5 different people living in one head. This translates itself really well into the fact that I can't dress myself very well. Like, and I have always been really enamored with the people who seem to have had their one goal, right? Like they have the thing that they do and they chase that thing and they become known for that thing and that is their passion. And those folks I've always looked at with some kind of, I guess, admiration. And I think we celebrate them as a society as well. And that's often the story that we hear. We don't often hear the part where I tried 50 things and they failed and this one thing succeeded, but I still do all of this other stuff, right? Like the idea of a Renaissance man or woman or person, in a way has kind of fallen by the wayside. It's all about niching and becoming an expert and all of those things. And so there's cognitive dissonance, I guess, for me there. But when you said when you mentioned unidimensional, I immediately went into actual dimensions, like thinking about something like a protozoa or, you know, a line on a paper that really does only exist in one dimension. And the reason that as a human, we are so successful as a species is really our ability to be so flexible. We are one of the only animals that is not hyper perfected for one specific thing. We can both swim and run and climb and etc. Most animals will have a specialty, and then they may be able to do some other things, but that specialty is really where they live, and we don't have that. And that's one of the reasons we are so successful. So why keep squidging myself into this box of one thing? And maybe that's the problem, is that it feels like that is the only way to be successful. And is that an outgrowth or a symptom of the type of media that we have built, where we engage with one another, where those are the kinds of things that make somebody successful? I don't know, but I do think there's a reason I changed my name from Nicole York Photography to Nicole Creates. There's something in there, something of truth in there somewhere. I'm going to shut up.
There's no need to shut up. I think this is listening to you work through this in real time, and I think it's fascinating, right? So I'm loving this direction of being broader, not niching down as much. And that probably goes against every internet guru right now that's saying you've got to hyper niche to have any level of success. Meh, I don't think so. I've used the term Renaissance man more times, more as a joking caricature of myself, just because, like you, I like to stay broad and do a lot of different things at once. I kind of like that. I think it keeps things interesting and it opens up opportunities in other areas of my life that might bring me some level of success along my path. Right. I love doing this. Well, I can talk about anything here. I can take pictures of anything. I can take pictures of me doing this and see what happens with that. I don't know. But being able to stay open-minded and open to whatever these twists and turns are, but understanding what your overall view of success in your life is, gives you the ability to stay fluid. And there is, in my opinion, absolutely nothing wrong with that. When you find that thing that really ties into that passion, as well as your mission, as well as, you know, your morals and ethics, stay in that sweet spot. That's where the audience comes from. But it doesn't have to be any one specific thing that you thought you needed to do in order to be successful. And I know I'm kind of circular talking here, but I think you get the point.
Yes, I do. So I love that. So
there's a lot of
saying,
oh, go ahead. I was
yeah,
going to say there's a lot of chatter in the room chat, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, so it sounds like you were right on it.
No, that's what I was going to get to, but I'd actually love to have you address it instead.
Yeah, so there's quite a few things going on. So Sissel is saying, but do you have to be successful at everything you enjoy doing? Does everything you enjoy doing have to earn money? And does success equal money? And I think personally, that's different for everybody. I'm very financially motivated and have been my entire life, but have started to draw back from that and find joy and gratitude and success in other places. Carol mentions, can we do a talk on the problems of being multidimensional and actually make money? That's a great topic. Connie Kennedy says, Nicole, what you said these last few minutes could have come out of my mouth verbatim. You said it well. Thanks. Clearly it's resonating. And then Carol adds back in, life's too boring to do just one thing, but making money with lots of potential, but no one thing making money with lots of potential, but no one thing making money. I'm not quite sure if I'm reading that correctly. and she's saying, well, if you just stick with one thing, then that will make you more money. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, whoever's telling you that. I think you can make money doing a lot of different things. You can make money doing one thing. It's where does your heart lie? Where does that fill you with joy? Because if you're just showing up to a job every day to make money, you don't enjoy what you're doing. Well, whether that's art or whether that's working in a factory, doesn't make any difference. It doesn't bring you joy. So find what it is you like to do. Understand, is it an opportunity for you to make some money? And if that's what you need, and then go with that. But yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in the chat. And then Miggs also says, but Matt, your IG work suggests you're quite niched in portraiture and doesn't seem to show the diversity and range you just spoke of. Totally valid point. I'm a big believer in you show what you want to sell. For Stone Tree Creative, I want to sell portraiture. So for me, that is a revenue source. So I'm going to show on my Instagram feed what I think people that want portraits want to see so that they understand my style and then can hire me and pay me for that work. That brings me a certain level of income. Now, what you don't see on the Stone Tree feed is the Firelance Media firearms photography. You don't see the cyanide bunker jewelry stuff. I spread out everywhere, but I don't cross-pollinate everything. I like keeping my niches separate, right? If they're revenue streams, but I myself like to stay with my fingers in a lot of different pies. So it's knowing what audience you're going for, but it doesn't mean that that has to be the only audience. So if it's just portraiture, I want to show people that are looking for portraiture what I think it looks like. Nicole, Bassam, Kat, Becca all have different audiences than me. And what they're showing, their audiences want. So for me, I keep my, behind the scenes, large corporate world of Matt. I have multiple different divisions. And I cater to every one of those because it fulfills the larger company, if you will. There are some companies that focus on one little thing. I'm just not built that way. So I think, to answer your question, it's a very astute observation. What I'm showing on the Stone Tree Instagram is not the breadth of my work. It's a focus on an audience that does bring me certain revenue. That's only part of what I do, but it's where I dedicate a lot of my focus. But it was a really good observation. Really good.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we've talked about often in the past. We've talked about, the fact that you cannot really market properly unless you understand who you're talking to and what they want, what problems you're solving for them, all of those things. And I think I absolutely ran into that issue, which is why I wrote under a pen name. I initially thought to myself, well, I can't be both Nicole York Photography and Nicole York the author because I'll confuse my audience, right? Only not realizing that when you take that route, it requires you to now become the marketing guy for two entirely different businesses. And being able to make that mental shift for me so that I could spend enough time on each thing that I was actually making that income, it turned into like an impossible scenario for me. It just didn't work. But I may have also approached that wrong. And that's one of those things you only learn through failing at it and trying again. And to be fair, I haven't tried again. I have just squished everything underneath one umbrella. Now, let me be completely transparent with everybody. Over the past 12 months or so, my income has come from several different places. I have been doing creative consulting, so I have been earning an income there. I do book covers and portraits and other art, so I have been making an income there. That's not photography, that's art. My photography has moved into something I do for myself, and that sometimes I will sell prints, but becomes it's almost a baseline fodder for other crafts. So I may use a photograph to become a painting, things like that. So that's where my photography has lived. I have been selling books. So my income actually has been coming from multiple different places already. It has just been tricky to manage everything. So rather than having success just with digital art, I guess, has been a small piece of my income, and other things have made that up. And to be fair, photography is included as well. I did some commercial work earlier this year, but that is not the entirety of my income. So I feel like I should be very clear that my income is diverse right now. I just have not focused on any one thing long enough for that single thing to become all of my income, but it is all under one umbrella, if that makes any sense. So Mig saying, so I think it important to point out that the diversity in being a verb and non-niching is more self-reflection, but not quite effective in a creative business where customers want a specialist. So that's kind of exactly the issue, right? Like that's where all of this revolves around, this idea or this need to niche enough that we're building a customer base who wants one specific thing. And strangely enough, apparently the group of people that I have built around myself over years on places like Facebook, I guess, has drawn them to me for very different things. The same group of people have hired me to create art for them, like logos for their business, to create book covers for them, to do creative consulting on their behalf. All of these things from the same audience, and they come to me to request these things, so it's all commission based. So maybe at the end of the day, what we're really looking at is what effort you put into telling people who you are. And if I'm telling people and showing them examples of the things, like a good part of my income last year was drawing people as witches for Halloween portraits. I had so many commissions, I couldn't keep up with them all the same audience as the people who buy my art prints and the people who hire me for creative consulting. So I don't know. I don't know.
One of the things that Sharon has added in here is, as well, as I often feel like I can't really be considered passionate about anything because I haven't fully immersed myself into any one thing and thus become defined by that one thing, like Olympians and athletes, as an example. And I just, as we get deeper into this conversation and hearing what you just said, what Mig's photo was talking about, what Sharon's talking about, I think we keep falling back to, we have to have this to be successful. We have to be one thing to be successful. And I don't think that's the case at all. And it's not necessarily such a self-reflection thing. If you look at someone like Elon Musk, right? Love him or hate him, I don't care. But the guy's going to space, he's building cars, he's running social media, he's got a billion other companies and a lot of money. And here's a guy that is guided by whatever certain moral compass, whatever mission drives him to help humanity, whatever it is. His brand is that he's a thinker. He's got his hands in a lot of places. Well, why can't we all do that as artists as well? If we're saying, we write, but we also craft, but we also do commission work, we also do photography, like there's nothing wrong with that. I think we can be all of those things. Where we choose to draw our most joy and energy from, what we want to give back, and how we determine what is successful in each one of those things, right? If I do one commercial job for Firelance that brings me 15 grand and I love that job, and I do $85,000 work for Stone Tree, but I don't like it, well, I'm still a photographer doing a bunch of different things, but my heart is in different areas. So what I love to do is try to stay passionate, stay in the moment, and approach my work and what I believe as making a living as an artist looks like to me. I'm less concerned about the audience. I'm more concerned about getting clients for the discipline in which I want to make money at a given time. And that to me is varying levels of success. There's success for what brings me joy. There's success financially. There's success with just interpersonal relationships. I think all of this is fluid. And as we try to niche down into a business and say, in order for me to run this business, I have to niche this way, and that's the only way that I can be successful, I don't think that's the case. And I don't know if that's really what we're discussing here. I think the notion of success needs to be set first. and then you find your way to it. And that's that winding opportunistic path that is different for everybody. And so long as you have what your vision of success for you looks like, I think the path will always change. And if you're open to that, it can be a beautiful path. If you're focused solely on providing one thing, it could also be a beautiful path. But I think you're setting yourself up for missing out on other things that could really enhance your enjoyment of whatever it is you're doing.
Well, and I think to Meg's point, this also could be a question of, who we are when she mentioned that self-reflection. I know of some folks who have one thing they really love, and that is what they do, and that is their thing. And to tell them, but it's okay, you can also do this, they would be like, yeah, but I don't want to, right? Like, this is what I want to do. And maybe what we're really talking about here is kind of two different philosophies on how to be related toward who we are as people. And there, I guess, maybe some of us who just, for whatever reason, that singularity doesn't work. And I don't know. Do you think that plays into it as well? I mean, I would guess for most people, trying to make a living out of everything is not going to work. There isn't a path for that, really, in the same way that there is a path for building a business with a singular goal. And of course, maybe you can have multiple businesses, but that usually requires you to be in a management role and not necessarily in a creative role, or you just don't have time for everything. So maybe that's something that's only possible for most folks once they have followed one thing until it was successful enough that they have an income where they can step aside and found or manage other things as well. But I really wonder how, kind of personality type and worldview plays into this whole question.
I think you hit it on the nail. I think it does play. I mean, those two things are fundamental in how we live our lives. It's our worldview and our personalities. And if you bring it back to basics, and I often say that, and I know it's motherhood and apple pie, but at the end of the day, we're all looking for that combination. I'm going to call it a complex combination of feelings. We're looking for a feeling. We're not looking for anything else, right? How we get there is essentially irrelevant. But I add to that the fact it's a complex set of feelings, right? So it's not just getting joy and satisfaction in one dimensional way. But when we have that feeling, we settle, right? When we don't have that feeling, we keep looking for it. And I've always said the brain doesn't care where you got that feeling. The brain just knows you have it or you know or you don't. So when we limit ourselves by saying this is what I want to do because I believe that's the only thing that gives me that what I'm looking for, that's where we're missing out on the fact that you can get that feeling in multiple different ways, and you owe it to yourself to understand what that feeling is or those combination of feelings are, and going and getting them in multiple different ways. And that's and there is no right or wrong. If you found it, great, enjoy it. If you haven't, do 10 things that give you that feeling, great, enjoy it. And if you haven't at all, well, you're going to be suffering because you're always looking for that feeling, and you got to do some self-reflection and understand it.
Coming back to self-reflection, as we so often do, and my reflection right now is that we have surpassed the end of the show. But it's a great conversation, so I hate to cut it off, but it is time to wind things down. So I just want to ask the panelists today, do we have any final thoughts or anything we think is worth leaving people to reflect on today?
I just think it's going to be different for everybody. And, just keep asking yourselves the question, what does success look like? What is it that I'm open to in terms of opportunity? Am I following the path that brings me the most joy? And if that's the case, then your definition of success and the path with which you take to get there is going to vary for everybody. There's no one that can tell you exactly what your path needs to be. You'll know it when you start to feel it. If you want to build a business off of that, go right ahead. Just understand that it may draw a little bit of that passion away. Doesn't necessarily mean it will, but just follow that heart. Follow that heart, because those are the opportunities that are going to bring you long-term success that have nothing to do with what we may consider success today. Philosophically vague.
Perfect. I think what I'm going to take away from this conversation is really a combination of what you and Bassam talked about, and the difference between vision or mission and those discrete goals that kind of help us get there, and really try to look and narrow down, or get a solid idea, I should say, of what that mission is for me, or what that vision is for me. And I think I know it in parts, but I don't know that I have a clear enough idea of it, or like Bassam has said so many times, I don't know if I've gotten the clarity yet to be able to say, yes, I'm moving in that direction. And maybe I'm taking many different paths to get there, but that's where I'm going. I'm certainly going to be thinking about that today, and having a more fluid idea of what that success looks like, instead of making it so rigid that any deviation means failure. And then really considering, of course, I may need to have very discrete goals when it comes to things like marketing, or I need to sell 1,000 books this month, or whatever it is. Like those may be very discrete goals for me, but then having those serve a vision that's broad enough that they can fit within that vision without feeling like success. So, yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody who was here today and being part of our Mindset Monday here and Morning Walk with the Artist Forge. Trying to learn to think like artists, or figuring out how we think and why we think it, so that we can change course as necessary. Really grateful to everybody who was here and part of the conversation, and to everybody who shared, excuse me, to everybody who shared in the comments today. I just appreciate you guys being here. We hope that you will take part in the self-portrait challenge. So if you look up at the top of the Clubhouse room, there is a pinned Facebook group where this month the May challenge is self-portrait. So we are all trying to create self-portraits in one form or another, whether that is through oil painting or clay or acrylic or resin or photography, however we do the thing, to make a piece that is representative of us, and then to share that in the comments of the pinned post in the Facebook group. And whoever gets the five folks who get the most reactions, likes, and hearts and things like that, those 5 images will go into the final live stream of the month. I promise not to be banned from Facebook this time. So we'll be able to go live, and we'll be using our visual literacy skills to break those images down and figure out how these artists have used the tools of art to get us to feel so much. And then the winner will go on to be featured as the featured post, the banner image in the Facebook and the group and page. And of course, on the website, we're going to have interviews with those folks, and podcast interviews as well with Matt Stagliano here for the Artist Forge podcast. So we encourage everybody to come and make art with us. And then we want to be able to celebrate you. So we hope you do that. And of course, you can go check out theartistforge.com, where podcasts and articles full of information about art are going up regularly. We will be back together on Friday morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. That's 6 a.m. for the West Coast and 9 a.m. for the East Coast, afternoon for our friends overseas. We hope you will come and join us then. Until then, have a fantastic week. Go make amazing things, and we will see everybody bright and early Friday morning. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.